What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to be talking about 10 players I am prioritizing on my waivers as we head into week 5 of the NFL season. We are recording this before Monday night's games, so if anything crazy happens in tonight's games, I will leave a comment in the comment section down below just with some of my takeaways. But as I mentioned, this is the top 10 players as of this moment that I am going to be prioritizing on my waiver wires. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these waiver wire pickups. So before we get into the top 10 guys, I do want to give you guys some double check players that are over or near 50% rostership that are probably worth checking on in your leagues. These guys are going to be Jacoby Myers, Cortland Sutton, Darnell Mooney, Braylon Allen, Sam Darnold, Bucky Irving, Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle, Zach Ertz, Alexander Madison, Roschon Johnson, and Justin Fields. A lot of these guys we've talked about in previous week's waiver wire videos, and a lot of these guys are rostered in over 50% of leagues, but if they are available on your waiver wire, you should be considering picking these guys up as well. So moving on to the first and the most obvious waiver wire pickup, I think at least this week, is going to be Dontayvion Wicks of the Green Bay Packers. Now, Christian Watson, he did suffer a high ankle sprain in Sunday's matchup against the Vikings. He is now expected to miss at least a few weeks, maybe even multiple weeks, and he is an IR candidate at the time of this recording, so he could potentially even just land on injured reserve. Now, in his absence, Dontayvion Wicks, he did see an expanded role. He did see some more work here in this one. He posted 5 catches on 13 targets for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, we know that when he is out, at least Christian Watson is out, we know Wicks will operate as the X wide receiver in the offense, and they just got their starting quarterback back. So this is a guy who is going to be in a good offense, playing a good role, and when he has seen a 70% or higher route participation rate, he has performed very well for us in fantasy football. So Dontayvion Wicks is a must-add for me here this week, and somebody I would definitely be willing to spend quite a bit of my fab on. I would say somewhere between 10 and 20%, and somebody I'd be willing to burn my priority on. Now, moving on to the next player I want to talk about, let's talk about Kareem Hunt for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a player that we talked about last week. When we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs backfield, I did mention that Kareem Hunt was a player that I liked the most in the backfield, even if he didn't have the most immediate upside last week in that matchup. Now, that being said, the backfield is super messy. It's only going to get very messy moving forward as they continue to add pieces to this in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That being said, last week, Hunt, he did lead the way for the Kansas City Chiefs, so he is a player that probably has the most upside in this offense as of right now. Now, Carson Steele really didn't play that much in this game. He might have just gotten benched. I haven't heard too much word about it, but he had 2 carries for 6 yards and a fumble in this week's game. As I mentioned, Hunt, he kind of operated as the lead guy. He saw some of the pass catching work. He saw a lot of the early down work in between the tackles, and he is just a guy who does seem like he is the number 1 right now. So as I mentioned, messy, inconsistent backfield probably on the horizon here in Kansas City, but they just lost Rashee Rice, and there's a chance that they lean a little bit more into the run. Kareem Hunt would probably be my number 1 pick in this backfield, but it could really just be a mix of all of these guys on any given week, and we just really don't know when to pick the matchup. So take that with a grain of salt. Kareem Hunt, definitely a guy I'm still picking up, but take it with a grain of salt there. Now, moving on to another player I would pick up, it is going to be Trey Sermon for the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor, he did suffer what looked to be a high ankle sprain late in week 4 against the Steelers. Sermon, he filled in for him the rest of the way, so he did operate as the main backup for Jonathan Taylor. We kind of knew that coming into the season, and he really wasn't able to do too much in his absence against a very tough Steelers defense. But next week he gets Jacksonville. That is going to be a much easier matchup for Trey Sermon, and it doesn't look like Jonathan Taylor is going to play in that one. He could miss a week or 2 here for this ankle sprain that he did suffer. That being said, Sermon, he's a guy that I'm picking up. I think you can flex him immediately into those starting lineups, and he's a player that, as we deal with some injuries, as we have bye weeks approaching here in week 5, you're most likely going to be able to rely on Trey Sermon, at least here in this one against Jacksonville, with maybe even Joe Flacco under center, maybe not. And that kind of segues us into our next guy, which is going to be Josh Downs for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, not only did Jonathan Taylor get injured in week 4, but as I mentioned, Joe Flacco did play in this one. Anthony Richardson was injured in this game as well. And it's kind of unclear as of this moment if Joe Flacco is going to be playing in this upcoming game or whether or not it's going to be Anthony Richardson. Whether or not he misses time, it doesn't really matter too much to me. Obviously, Joe Flacco is probably better for Josh Downs from an accuracy standpoint, but Josh Downs, he had a big game in this one and he does deserve to be picked up. He posted 8 catches on 9 targets for 82 yards and a touchdown. He's a player that spent the most of the early season recovering from an injury that he suffered in the preseason. He's a talented player and he needs to be added in these formats. I think it's worth noting too that with Flacco under center, you're probably going to be starting Josh Downs this week. If it's Anthony Richardson, maybe you have some other decisions that need to be made, but regardless of the quarterback, it is obvious that Josh Downs needs to be added to fantasy football teams. Now let's move on to the next guy. The next guy for me is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. He is a player who has quietly, very quietly been a PPR merchant in fantasy football leagues over the first month of the season. He's posted double-digit weeks in 3 out of 4 matchups so far this year. Not to mention he has seen 12 or more targets in 2 different games this year, including 14 targets in week 4 versus Dallas. Now, Wan'Dale hasn't really had a lot of big plays. He's working very close to the line of scrimmage, and obviously you still have the quarterback play of Daniel Jones, but with Malik Neighbors seeing a ton of the defense's attention and Wan'Dale seeing this much volume in PPR leagues, the PPR ability alone does make him worth picking up, and he's probably a player that we can flex most weeks as long as he is getting this type of volume. Now, moving on to our next wide receiver, it is going to be Xavier Legette of the Carolina Panthers. He did catch 6 out of 10 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown in the Panthers' 34-24 loss to the Bengals on Sunday. Obviously, Adam Thielen, he is going to miss the next couple of weeks, and Xavier Legette looks like he is going to be stepping in and filling in for him. Now, his 10 targets that he saw here this week, that was second on the team only to Deontay Johnson. He should be looked at as this team's number 2 wide receiver as long as Adam Thielen is out. He has more upside than guys like Jonathan Mingo, who some people were in on as we went into week 4 last week, but they do have a tough matchup this week against Chicago's defense. However, Atlanta in week 6 and dead last Washington in week 7 are much better defenses that he could have bigger games against here in the future. Now, moving on to another player I want to pick up, it is going to be Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. Now, he did have 2 touchdowns in this matchup before he left the game with a rib injury. That being said, they did talk about it in a press conference recently. Dennis Allen did say that this is a similar placement of injury for Taysom Hill to the one that did force him to miss his game in game 3. That said, he said it's a new injury, not a re-aggravation. So not necessarily a re-aggravation. That does make you feel, I guess, a little bit better, but obviously you don't want to see him hurt. So although he is injured and we are going to be waiting on some more updates to kind of see the severity of this, it doesn't seem like it's going to be super severe. And that being said, Taysom Hill, he is giving you a significant advantage at the tight end position just based on the unique usage that he is seeing. So if he's healthy, he's in your lineup most likely as a starting tight end. And I think because of that, he should be picked up and at least stashed on the back end of rosters, even if he is injured here this week and doesn't play. Now, moving on to Tre Tucker for the Las Vegas Raiders. He has now had touchdowns in back-to-back weeks for the Raiders, and he should remain in this type of streaming, flex-worthy type of play conversation as long as Davante Adams is out and sidelined for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not to mention that there have also been rumors of a potential Davante Adams trade. This has kind of floated all over the last year or so, but it does seem like this is more of a reality as the Raiders are looking kind of mediocre right now and could be looking to move a veteran wide receiver. If that were to happen, obviously that would vault Tre Tucker into a much larger role for the remainder of the season. And that said, this is no means a player that I'm going to be spending a lot of my fab on. I'm not going to be burning a priority on, but this is a player that I'm definitely willing to spend $1 on or just throw in a late waiver claim just to add him and see what happens over the next week or two. Now, my second to last player is going to be Tank Bigsby, and I get it. We've talked about Tank Bigsby a lot on this channel over the last few weeks. It feels like he's in every single waiver wire video, but for whatever reason, people are not picking him up and putting him on their teams. His roster percentage is still very, very low. Now, in this last week, he was more effective than Travis Etienne as a runner. We did see Travis Etienne spend some time on the sideline due to what they said was a shoulder injury, so that is kind of why he was out of this one. At least that's what they are saying. It's very clear to me that Tank Bigsby is the backup to Travis Etienne and the clear handcuff to Travis Etienne, and he has some standalone value that I feel like is making him rosterable in fantasy leagues alone without a Travis Etienne injury. Now, that being said, this is a player that I just don't understand the logic of why he will not be on a team moving forward. He has to be on fantasy football teams, and not because I think he's going to overtake Travis Etienne, but he's been good enough with the touches he's received, and Travis Etienne dealing with a shoulder injury, he's a clear handcuff, and he needs to be rostered in fantasy football leagues. So I don't get it. right now, I think he's still under like 20% in fantasy football leagues, and that number definitely needs to move up going into the next week. And now my last and final player I want to talk about, it is going to be Jordan Whittington of the Los Angeles Rams. He is the least rostered player, I think, in today's episode. And to me, he is a very sneaky ad, and an ad that I am definitely trying to make in my fantasy football leagues, while Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are sidelined for the next couple of weeks, maybe even to the next month or so for the Los Angeles Rams. Now, last week, Whittington, he led the Rams in receptions and targets. He also was second in receiving yards, and he saw a massive snap share increase moving into that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua role that we've seen in years past. I think if we continue to see this trend, Whittington can be a player that surprises us here in the next couple of weeks, and he's a player that I'm going to add and potentially even stream here in week 5 if I need a wide receiver to plug in and play this week. And at the minimum, this is a player that I think you can stash as the Rams go into their week 6 bye and just see what he does in week 5. If he does something good, obviously you have a good player. If not, you cut him moving into the bye. So make sure you go pick up Jordan Whittington and stash him on the back end of your rosters. Maybe even play him if you need him. I think I'm comfortable doing that here this week. So there you have it. There's 10 players that I'm going to be adding as we go into week 5 of the NFL season. As always, if you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed and hitting that notification bell. That way you never miss any future episodes. And last but not least, make sure you are a member of the Discord. The Discord is the best place to get my advice because I'm able to be in there more often than I am making videos. So make sure you go join that Discord. It is free to join, like I said, so there is no risk in doing that. With all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.